What's up everyone, Soldier First Class here. In today's mission, we're taking on the top 10 easiest Soulsborne bosses. While the Soulsborne series is legendary for its brutal difficulty and its incredibly tough bosses,
it's supposed to be a fucking RPG. What role am I playing? The fucking victim?
even this series is no stranger to pushovers. For this list, I won't be including things like the Great Serpent from Sekiro or Ancient Wyvern from Dark Souls 3, since those are more interactive set pieces than really boss fights. Sorry for the two people who wanted to see the Ancient Wyvern in this video. We're also not ranking them by cheese methods either, because Demon of Hatred from Sekiro would make this list, so I'm sure you understand why cheese needs to stay in the fridge just this once. Before we get started, just in case you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe and turn those notifications to all so that you never miss an upload. Now let's get right into it. Number 10, Ancient White. Just kidding. Pinwheel, Dark Souls. Due to the slower, weightier pace of the combat systems, some of the bosses in these games are downright brutal. However, this boss didn't get the memo as it's almost laughably easy. Boss difficulty is ultimately based off your character build and how skilled of a player you are, but in this battle, neither of those really matters. Walk in with whatever you've got handy, hit the boss a few times, and boom, fight over. This is one of those blink and you'll miss it boss fights, yet still one of the most memorable in the franchise, pretty much just for the memes. Number 9, Celestial Emissary, Bloodborne. Bloodborne, like many other Soulsborne games, is no stranger to brutal boss fights. With bosses like Orphan of Kos, Amygdala, and the Moon Presence, Bloodborne is challenging to say the least. But that doesn't change the fact that the game has a few bosses on the easier side of things. Similar to Deacons of the Deep from Dark Souls 3, the main objective of this fight is to defeat the hidden, real Emissary. After reaching 50% of its health bar, the Celestial Emissary goes Incredible Hulk, but without the strength to match. Keep smacking it around and you'll have this boss defeated in a matter of a few minutes or even less. This is more of a gateway boss than anything, as the next boss you face in Bloodborne is much more difficult. Number 8, Phalanx, Demon's Souls. Demon's Souls was the first game in the franchise and featured several bosses that had redefined what difficulty meant in video games. I also hadn't played this one until the PS5 remake, but really enjoyed my time with it. However, a lot of the bosses in Demon's Souls are considered gimmick fights and feature special ways of defeating them. Phalanx in particular is extremely weak to fire, and the game provides you with several firebombs in the map before facing this boss. Sit back, throw firebombs at it, and in no time you'll have beaten the first boss of Demon's Souls. Number 7, Covetous Demon, Dark Souls 2. When I played Dark Souls 2, it was the second to last Soulsborne game I needed to complete before I was finished with the entire franchise, the other being Bloodborne. It was also the first time in the series where I was just ready for the game to be over by about the halfway point. So when facing the Covetous Demon at Earthen Peak, I was actually happy as this boss fight was a complete joke. This mixture of Rancor and Jabba the Hutt is about as mobile as you'd expect, but he does have the ability to eat you and remove all of your gear and weapons if you're not careful. But as you can imagine with his mobility, you can just immediately put them back on after you create some space. It doesn't have much in the way of range, so just back away from it when it attacks, wail on it, and the fight is over before you know it. Number 6, Deacons of the Deep, Dark Souls 3. With Nameless King, Dark Eater Midir, and Sister Friede, you'd think Dark Souls 3 is one of the hardest games in the series. However, it too has a few easy bosses, and Deacons of the Deep is one of them. Found in the Cathedral of the Deep, this boss fight is on par with the Celestial Emissary in difficulty. Much like the Celestial Emissary, the trick to this one is finding the real Deacon, which glows red, and defeating them. Keep focusing on the red glow, and you'll have taken out another Dark Souls pushover. Number 5, The Folding Screen Monkeys, Sekiro Shadows Die Twice. While Sekiro has become one of my favorite games in the franchise, and honestly one of my favorite games of all time, it's one of the most difficult games I've ever played. So when you encounter an easy boss in this game, it feels like a reward and a nice change of pace. The worst part about the Folding Screen Monkeys is just catching them. This one is more of a time sink than your average boss fight, and while subsequent playthroughs make this boss even easier, the first time through can get confusing. But this is a list about easiest fights, and it doesn't get much easier than the Folding Screen Monkeys. There's only really one thing you need to worry about with this fight, and that's the ghost monkeys that come after you, and they can induce the instant death terror status effect if your meter gets filled. Finish off these monkeys pretty quickly, and go on to the next area. Number 4, Beastman of Farum Azula, Elden Ring. The problem with Elden Ring's bosses isn't their difficulty or lack thereof, it's the freedom the game provides to just come back when you can't meet a challenge. That's why ranking bosses by difficulty for Elden Ring is so, well, difficult. A boss that's beating your ass now might just require a new weapon or level grinding and become baby mode when you come back to it. Or you may have not found that boss the first time through and are just completing map markers, only to find that the boss of the area is a giant bitch. However, even at the beginning of the game, Beastman of Farum Azula is basically a tutorial boss. Found in a cave to the left of the first forest in Limgrave, the Beastman is a good boss to practice parrying if you're a sword and board build, but that's about it. It doesn't take much to take out this boss and move on to the rest of the game. You'll fight variants of this boss as normal enemies when you reach Farum Azula later in the game, and they are definitely stronger than this one. Number 3, Witches of Hemwick, Bloodborne. This fight was tough to rank because it goes from easy to baby mode super quick depending on how you approach it. If you go in with Insight, the game's alternate currency and world shifting mechanic, this fight is harder but still easy. But if you use a bold Hunter's Mark to warp out of the area as soon as you enter the boss room, then go spend your Insight at the Hunter's Dream, when you come back to the fight, it's damn near impossible to lose. This is due to the witches using your Insight to spawn additional enemies that make the fight a little bit harder. With zero Insight, the witches can't summon and have to fight you themselves. This fight is more annoying than difficult because the witches warp around the room and can revive each other if you don't kill them in time. They also disappear after warping and only reveal themselves when you get in proximity to them. But even if they do, they're so easy it doesn't even really matter. Just hit them with whatever you've got on you and finish the fight with little trouble. Number 2, Miss Noble, Sekiro Shadows Die Twice. Miss Noble is barely even a boss at this point. This one is closer to Pinwheel when it comes to actual challenge and danger, and is basically one death blow away from shriveling up and relieving the area of its heavy fog. You'd think this boss would be highly forgettable, but I think it's so easy and does something a little unique to the world state that it's hard to forget about it. There are much tougher versions later in the game as normal enemies, but really only because they can enfeeble you if you're not careful. Deathblow this boss, give it a few more swipes, and move on to the next part of the game. Before we get to number 1, let's look at some honorable mentions. Moonlight Butterfly, Dark Souls. The Adjudicator, Demon's Souls. Soldier of Godric, Elden Ring. Number 1, Millennia, Goddess of... True King Allant, Demon's Souls. So you've beaten Demon's Souls, or so you thought. But there's one final battle you'll face after defeating Old King Allant. True King Allant is more of a reward for completing the game than he is an actual boss, but he has a health bar and does damage, so here we are. Give him a few good whacks with your hit stick, and send this unrecognizable blob to the afterlife where he belongs. And this has been the top 10 easiest Soulsborne bosses. Be sure to let me know what you thought of this list, and give me your own personal list in the comments section below. I also plan to do a top 10 hardest Soulsborne bosses, and I'm looking forward to seeing how that list shapes up for me. Thanks for watching everyone, and don't forget to slash that like button and share the video to help me battle the toughest boss on YouTube, the YouTube algorithm. Subscribe to the channel and turn those notifications to all so you never miss an upload. I'm Soldier First Class, and I'm on to the next mission. Later, guys.